Hello, it's Ushalex here again, and welcome to this course where we'll be looking at graphic design principles.
So, what are design principles? Design principles are sets of instructions that guide the way we lay out elements on our designs. In the previous module, which is module 1, we said that graphic design elements are simply the building blocks of everything we do in design. We listed examples of these elements to be lines, shapes, space, texture, and color. And in the previous module, we went deep into defining and giving examples of graphic design elements. So in this module, we'll be focusing on how we will lay out these elements on our designs. These elements that we say they are the building blocks of our designs, how do we then arrange them? How do we lay them out on our design? So we have 7 principles that guide the way we lay out our design elements. And they are: number 1, balance; number 2, contrast; number 3, emphasis or hierarchy; number 4, movement or rhythm; number 5, proportion; number 6, function; and number 7, alignment. So let's look at the first one, which is balance. When we are trying to design, it's important that the way our elements are laid out on a design should create a feeling of balance. This is because every element you place on a design has a weight. Just like in your house, where you wouldn't put all the furnitures in one corner of a room. You can't crowd all your heavy elements in one area of your design. You need to spread them so that they will be balanced. And there are 2 ways you do that in graphic design. So these 2 types of balance are symmetrical balance and asymmetrical balance. So what is symmetrical balance? Symmetrical balance occurs when you have 2 identical sides of a design with a central point of axis. So if you cut the design in half, the left and the right are mirror images of each other. Symmetrical balance allows you to draw attention to all areas of a design equally. For you to really understand what this definition is saying, let's look at a few examples. This is a movie poster design of Civil War, Captain America by Marvel Studio. Now use your eyes to divide this poster design into 2. Like, let there be an imaginary line at the center of this design. With that being done, look at the left part of the design. You can see that what we have at the left part of the design is exactly the same thing we have at the right part of the design. You can see Captain America by the left. You can see how big his head is. The same way you can see Tony Stark, the Iron Man, by the right. You can see his head is exactly that big too, facing each other. Then if you take a step down, you can see other superheroes, the way they are arranged. That's exactly the same way the other superheroes too are arranged opposite them. So this design has a form of balance because what we have on the left is exactly the same thing we have on the right. With this example, I know you are now getting a good understanding of what we now mean by symmetrical balance. Now let's look at another example. This is also a movie poster. And just as we did in the previous example, use your eyes to divide this poster into 2. And when that is done, you see that the left part of the design is exactly the same thing with the right part of the design. When the imaginary line in your head cuts through this design and shares it into 2, this big guy at the back, the line will cut him into 2 right from the middle of his head, and this boy at the middle, even this 4 in the word Fantastic Four, and cut it down to the bottom. So, and you can see at the either sides of the design, we have one girl by the left and we have one boy by the right. You see, it's balanced. What we have on the left is exactly what we have on the right. We have one person by the left, we now have one person by the right. Now let's look at another design. This is a movie poster as well of the movie Jumanji. So in this design, just as we did in the previous examples, let's divide it with an imaginary line in our head. So now we have divided the poster into 2. If you look closely at the center of the design at the top, you can see the Jumanji mountain, where we have the mountain that has the head like leopard or a tiger. You can see it at the top. Then if you look closely as well at the top, you can see 2 helicopters. Now that we have divided the flyer into 2, you can see how they put this helicopter at the top. One helicopter by the left and that helicopter by the top right too. Then when you look down as well, you can see directly above the head of these four friends, you can see the mouth of a hippopotamus widely open by the left. Then by the right, you can see a rhinoceros. You see how they balance these two animals together. One animal is this side and another animal is this other side. So directly below it, you now see the four friends that went to the Jumanji. Now still looking at the imaginary line that we have placed in between the poster design, you can see two friends by the left and two other friends by the right. What we have by the left is the same thing we have by the right. The design is balanced. Now enough of movie posters. Now let's look at a simple advert by Apple. A design Apple made for their laptop. As usual, let's divide this design with an imaginary line in our head. And you can see that this design is balanced. Apple placed the laptop they are talking about, an orange color MacBook in the middle, and now put the blue ones by the left and the right, just to create a form of balance for the design. So with all these four examples I have given you, now you have a full understanding of what a symmetrical balance is. Now let's look at asymmetrical balance. A symmetrical balance is when you have two dissimilar sides of a design with unequal visual weights and yet still has a sense of balance. So in the previous type of balance, where we have the same visual weight on the both sides of the design, like what we have on the left is what we have on the right of the design. In this particular type, we have different visual weights on the left and different one on the right. So what we have on the left is not what we have on the right, but yet it still gives a sense of balance. How is this being achieved? Let's look at some examples for us to understand this. This is just a simple poster design. Now, just as we did in the previous design, let's put an imaginary line to divide this design into two. Now we have done that. You can see by the left, there is the head of this guy that is catching your attention first. Then at the other part of the designer puts a lot of text to balance out the weight that has been created by the head of the guy in the left. So you see here, the text by the right has balanced out the head of the guy on the left. So the text and the head of the guy are different elements with different visual weights, but yet it still appears balanced. Let's look at another example. And as usual, let's divide this design into two by placing an imaginary line at the middle. And you can see clearly on the right, you can see the picture of a young girl. And by the left, to balance out the weight of this picture, the text are put on the left. This design appears balanced, despite the fact that there are different elements, which is the picture and the text on the design. These elements have different weights. Somehow this weight has been balanced by placing a lot of text on one side and placing the image on the other side of the design. So let's look at one more design of asymmetrical balance. Just as we have always done, let's put our imaginary line at the center of the design to divide it. Let's see what the designer did here. At the bottom left, the designer placed the theme or the topic of the design. And what did he do to balance the weight that this has caused on the design? What did he do to balance it? He placed the guests and the speakers of the event by the top right. So these two has already balanced out each other. Then also there's something else the designer did. By the top left, the designer puts the brands that are organizing this event, which is Willpower and the Outer, by the top left. Then to balance out the names of these brands that he put by the top left, he brought out the social media handles by the bottom right. So despite using a group of elements that have different visual weights, the designer has been able to creatively balance them out by placing them strategically on the design. From all the examples we have given, you can see the important role that the principle of balance plays in every design. Every good design must have a form of balance. You don't just throw elements around. Don't just carry elements and put anyhow you like. You must put them in such a way that they create a form of balance. Either by putting them in a way where the elements on the left are exactly the same thing that are on the right part of the design. Or you put them in such a way that what you have on the left is balanced with what you have on the right. From all these examples, you also notice that these designs are attractive. Designs that have good balance, either asymmetrical or symmetrical, are very, very attractive to the eyes because the informations are organized. When your informations are not organized, it's difficult for people to even look at it. In fact, it looks scattered. People will find it difficult to pay attention to it. So having a good understanding of how balance works and applying it in your design will help your design to stand out. And that's all for balance as a design principle. So, and as an activity for this video, you will have to share designs with good asymmetrical and symmetrical balance. Make it 3 designs for each category. That is, for the activity, designs you have to submit will be 6 in total. That means 3 designs with symmetrical balance and 3 designs with asymmetrical balance. Submit it. See you in the next video where we'll be looking at the next design principle, which is contrast.